Hello people, this is NUSensei, and today I have a short video regarding people asking me questions. Ever since I started covering archery on this channel, I've had a lot of questions. Questions about equipment and starting out and training and competitions and everything. And I'm totally fine with answering your questions. Just do bear in mind that I am a very busy person. Apart from doing videos, I also run an archery club. I do training, I do coaching, and I sometimes do competitions. And of course, I do have a full-time job. So I actually have very little time to answer questions, but what time I have, I actually am quite happy to answer your questions. For those who don't know, if you want to ask me a question, you can do so in several ways. You can post a comment directly in the video. I usually get a notification from YouTube and or Google+. So I will see that. Sometimes I do miss it because the comments sometimes don't pop up. But I'd say 90% of the time I do get it. You can post a question directly on my channel page or through a private message, and that's completely fine. Some people might use Google+, which I have to use, but I think YouTube and Google start to disconnect those things, so I don't really use Google+. Otherwise, there is a business email address, which you can find on my About page. That's nu.sensei.archery@gmail.com. A few people have emailed me directly, which is fine as well. And finally, there's the Facebook page, which has proved to be quite popular. I get a lot of likes and comments on the Facebook page, as well as personal questions, which is completely fine. So if you want to ask me a question, there are many ways you can do so. Now, if you are using YouTube to post comments, please bear in mind that if you have your comment settings or your Google Plus settings set on private, I can't actually reply to your comment. I can still answer your question by sending you a personal message through YouTube, but I'd rather not do that. So if you do want me to reply to an inquiry on a YouTube comment, please make sure that I can reply to your comment. Otherwise, I will generally just ignore it. For the fans and viewers who are sending thank you messages, I do read everything. So thanks a lot for the kind words. It is very motivating for me to make more archery videos if I get positive feedback, and nothing is wasted. So I might not reply to your comment or your thank you, but I do read it, I do appreciate it, and because of that, I'm more tempted to make more content. So again, thank you for spurring me into action. Regarding people asking me questions, although I try my best to answer your questions to the best of my knowledge, there are several things which I don't like or want to answer, and I want to use this video to remind people of that and clarify the sort of things which I generally avoid. A lot of you who watch my archery videos are first-timers and beginners, and some of you are more experienced, but for the most part, many people use this channel as a portal for their archery experience. Whether they're going to bow hunting, or sports, or hobby, or traditional, whatever the case, people from around the world shoot many different styles, and often they come to this place. And that's great. That said, do bear in mind that as for myself and for the channel, it is primarily a target sport style archery channel. I do cover a lot of beginner newbie stuff for all people, but I am personally only a target recurve shooter. That means if you ask me a question about bow hunting equipment or hunting laws or traditional shooting or traditional gear, I'm really not a good person to ask. I am not much better than Googling the information yourself. So I don't want to not answer your question, but I don't want to answer a question that I don't know. So there are better places to ask and better people. So if you want to ask me, I do apologize. I can't answer your question. More specifically, I'm exclusively a recurve shooter. I don't use compounds. I don't work with compounds, so I'm not very familiar with compound bows and technique and technology. I know people who are into compounds, and of course in my club people shoot compounds, but I myself know very little about compounds. I know enough to give people a basic rundown of how compounds work, some basic entry-level gear that people recommend, but anything more specific than that, I cannot answer. So for those of you who are asking questions about whether I recommend certain compound models or whether this bow is good, I don't know. I can't answer that question. So you're saying, is this bear bow good, or is this PAC bow good, or this Hoyt bow good? I don't know. I can't recommend gear for you if you're a compound shooter. I know this might be disappointing because, again, a lot of you guys are new archers and you like this channel because of how easy it is to understand these new archery ideas. And there might be a lack of compound channels, which are the equivalent of what I do. And that's fair, but again, unfortunately, I don't shoot compounds, so I can't answer compound questions. The other grey area that I don't like to really discuss or explore is the really cheap bottom end of archery equipment. I'm talking about especially cheap compound bows that you can buy off eBay or Amazon. And even other bows like the Apex bows or the Atanga bows and other really cheap budget brands. Now, I'm not saying these bows are bad, and especially, well, some bows are bad. On eBay, you get a lot of cheap Chinese knockoff brands. There are some locally made bows which are legitimate, but firstly, again, I don't work with the compounds, but I do tend to prefer reliability and reputation. And if a certain brand is not stocked in archery stores, I'm not as likely to recommend it. So I might recommend a cheap PZ bow because it is supported in local archery stores, but I wouldn't recommend a cheap eBay brand because it's something which you would get very little support for. But generally speaking, I personally feel responsible if I recommend a bow to you. And if it's a bow that I'm not convinced is good value, then I don't want to push it onto you. So for me, if you're asking about, say, recurves, and you're asking, NUSensei, is the SF Axiom a good bow? Well, I've used one. It is generally a very reliable bow. Yes, I recommend it. But if you're going for something like a really cheap Barnett Sport Flight, which is like $50 US for a whole kit, then even though I will say the bow shoots, but I can't really recommend it because I don't think those kinds of investments are long term. These are very cheap, short thrills. Now, if you have a young kid who needs a bow for a week, then I would probably recommend a cheap used fiberglass bow. But if you're looking into taking archery as a hobby, as someone who is a slightly more serious archer than the average hobbyist, I would generally recommend something a little higher up, like a wooden recurve. And likewise with compound bows, I generally, as my baseline, would be recommending bows like the Diamond Infinite Edge, or the Mission Craze. These are very, not to say cheap, but they're very reliable, flexible, entry-level bows that are reasonably affordable. Any lower than that, and I'm going to say, look, it's a cheap bow, you get what you pay for, and I can't really recommend it because I haven't used it. So, again, the two main areas which I would generally ask that you avoid asking me would be, one, compound bows in general, because I don't use compounds, and two, really cheap budget online equipment, because from my experience, they're real low quality. I can't recommend between this really bad $100 bow and this other really bad $100 bow. There are limits that I won't go below, so let's put it that way. I can answer almost anything else that I do know, but for these areas, I get a lot of questions about cheap compound bows. I'm not the best person to ask, and I will be open. I am kind of biased and skewed towards certain brands, just because from my experience, certain brands are more reliable, others are very cheap one-shot purchases, and I've never seen someone buy a cheap eBay bow actually stay committed to the sport. That's why I'm making this point. Okay, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying people will buy them, don't use them. So again, thank you for the feedback and the positive comments, and please do keep asking me questions. I will try my best to answer what I can. Just recently, there's been a lot of people asking me about these questions, and as the channel is growing, more people will be asking these questions. So hopefully, this video will clarify some of the things which I can help you with, and some of the things which I personally don't feel comfortable in giving advice for. Anyway, this is NUSensei. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.